She stood in a glass room, clutching a red delivery bag while rich men stared past her. On their map, elderly tenants had become empty rooms. But if one quiet girl still remembered every door, who had really lost their humanity? The first time Lila Hart noticed the lights going out on the old boardwalk route, she was carrying 3 dinners, 2 pill reminders, and a paper bag of bananas that Mrs. Doyle insisted were for whoever looked hungrier than me. She shifted the meal carrier higher on her shoulder and stopped outside the 3rd-floor landing of the Seabreeze rooms, where the carpet smelled faintly of salt, old coffee, and furniture polish. The place had never been pretty. The paint peeled around the stair rails, and the radiator in the hall knocked like somebody trying to get out of a locked closet. But every evening, behind those thin doors, somebody was waiting for her. "Lila, honey, is that you?" A voice called from behind 3B. "It's me," Lila said, already reaching for the clipboard tucked against her hip. "Turkey meatloaf tonight. And before you complain, no, I did not cook it." A laugh came from inside, thin but real. That was how the route worked. Lila knocked, waited, listened for footsteps, and never left a tray outside unless she heard a voice answer. She knew who took extra gravy, who pretended not to need help opening the plastic lids, who kept the television loud to make the room feel less empty. She knew which doors had family photos taped beside them and which had nothing but a brass number worn dull by years of hands. The younger drivers hurried through buildings like this. They had other deliveries, better tips, phones buzzing in their pockets. Lila did too, but she had learned that rushing an old person's dinner could feel too much like rushing the old person. So she took the extra minute. She waited for the chain lock. She checked the shaky signatures. Sometimes she wrote down things nobody asked her to write down. Swollen ankles, missed medication, a new cough, a light bulb burned out in the hall. She never called it a record. She just told herself that if somebody disappeared, she wanted to remember when they had last opened the door. Outside, Atlantic City was turning gold around the edges. The casino towers caught the late sun and threw it back brighter than the ocean. Music drifted from somewhere near the boardwalk, mixed with gull cries and the tired rumble of traffic. Tourists moved toward the glass doors and glowing signs, while Lila moved the other way into the old buildings that sat just behind the shine. At 2A, Mr. Albright opened the door in a cardigan with one missing button. "You're late," he said, "by 4 minutes. At my age, 4 minutes is a long time." She smiled and handed him the tray. "Then I'll make tomorrow 3 minutes early." He took the meal, but his eyes moved past her toward the hallway window. From there, they could see a crane standing beyond the next block, its long arms still against the evening sky. "They're coming closer," he said. Lila followed his gaze. "Who?" He gave a small shrug, but his mouth tightened. "People with drawings. People with clean shoes." She wanted to ask more, but he had already looked down at the tray as if the conversation had worn him out. Lila marked his delivery complete, added a note about the hallway bulb, and moved on. By the time she reached the last stop, her shoulder ached. The meal carrier was lighter now, but the strange feeling in her chest had grown heavier. It had been there for a week, maybe longer. Residents were whispering more. Doors opened slower. Twice that evening, people had asked her whether she had heard anything, and when she asked what they meant, they said, "Never mind." At the end of the hall, Celia Monroe waited, with her door cracked before Lila even knocked. Celia was not the kind of woman who liked being helped. She signed the clipboard with a careful hand and inspected the dinner label as if Lila might have tried to trick her with low-sodium peas. "You keep leaving your little notes?" Celia asked. Lila paused. "Just the usual delivery notes." Celia looked at her over the rim of her glasses. Usual things matter when people start pretending rooms are empty. The words landed oddly, but Celia had already taken her tray. "What does that mean?" Lila asked. "It means you're a good girl," Celia said, softer than usual. "And good girls should learn not to trust pretty paper." Then she closed the door. Lila stood there a moment, the empty carrier hanging from her hand. Behind the doors, televisions murmured. Someone coughed. Somewhere stairs, a pipe rattled to life. The building felt the same as it always had, but not quite. It felt as if everyone inside knew a storm was coming and had decided not to be the first to say it out loud. When Lila finally got home, the small apartment she shared with her aunt smelled like canned tomato soup and lemon dish soap. June Hart was at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on, a stack of mail in front of her, and a smile that came too quickly. "You're back," June said. "I saved you half a sandwich. You hate saving half a sandwich. I'm a generous woman. You're a terrible liar." June gave a short laugh and began gathering the mail into a neat pile. Too neat. Lila noticed one envelope turned face down beneath the others. The corner creased from being held too tightly. "Everything okay?" Lila asked. "Fine. You say fine, like people say fire." June looked up, and for 1 second the hardness slipped. She was 61, but some evenings she looked older, especially after losing her hotel job. She had spent years making beds for guests who never learned her name, and now she guarded this little room as if it were the last proof that work had meant something. "It's just bills," June said. Leela set the empty carrier by the door and washed her hands at the sink. She wanted to press. She wanted to pull the hidden envelope out from under June's palm and read whatever had made her aunt's face go pale. But she also knew June. Push too hard, and the door would shut. So Lila sat, ate the saved half sandwich, and listened while June talked about nothing. A neighbor's broken television, the price of eggs, a woman downstairs who had complained about the laundry machines again, all the little ordinary things people used to cover a fear they were not ready to name. Later, while June rinsed the mugs, Leil's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, expecting one more late meal from the regular route. Instead, the pickup note was marked private. The drop-off listed only as a casino tower near the ocean, upper office entrance, staff elevator. A special dinner delivery. High priority. Extra pay. Leela frowned. She almost declined. Her feet hurt, and there was something wrong in the apartment. Something wrong in the building. Something wrong in the way Celia had said empty rooms. But the pay flashed again. June turned from the sink. "Another one?" "Just one," Lila said, reaching for the red insulated bag by the door. "Some office at a casino." June's hand tightened around the dish towel. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Lila slung the bag over her shoulder and stepped back into the hall, not knowing that high above the boardwalk, in a room made of glass and polished money, were already deciding what would happen to the old building her aunt still called home. By the time Lila reached the casino tower, the red insulated bag had begun to cut into her shoulder. The staff entrance was nothing like the old buildings on her route. No peeling paint, no loose railings, no taped-up signs asking people to keep the laundry room clean. Here the doors opened without a sound, and the lobby smelled of polished stone, cold air, and money. A security guard checked the delivery note on her phone, looked once at her worn sneakers, and pointed her toward a private elevator. "Upper office level," he said. "Don't wander. I wasn't planning to," Lila answered, but her voice came out smaller than she wanted. The elevator climbed so smoothly she barely felt it move. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet hallway with glass walls and a view of the ocean turning black beyond the lights of the boardwalk. At the end of the hall, a man in a dark suit opened a door before she knocked. Inside, the room was all glass, polished wood, and silence. A long table stood near the windows. Several people sat around it with folders, tablets, and untouched coffee. At the far end sat Victor Rains, still enough that the whole room seemed arranged around him. He was not loud, not smiling, not trying to impress anyone. He simply looked up, and the conversation stopped. Leela tightened her grip on the delivery bag. A man standing near the table gave her a quick, irritated look. "That can go on the side counter." He was smooth-faced, neatly dressed, and spoke as if every word had already been approved by a lawyer. Grant Mercer. Though Lila did not know his name yet, had the kind of confidence that made a room smaller for everyone else. She moved toward the counter. The red bag looked painfully bright in that room, like a piece of the street had been dragged into a place where it did not belong. As she lifted out the containers, her eyes caught the large site map spread across the table. She did not mean to look, but she saw the shape of the block first, then the building outline, Then the room numbers. Her hand froze above the bag. The map showed the old Seabreeze rooms and the buildings beside it, only they were not called homes or rooms. They were marked as units. Several had a clean stamp beside them. Vacant. Leela stared. 3B was marked vacant. 2A was marked vacant. Celia's floor was marked vacant. A cold feeling passed through her, sharper than the air conditioning. "That's not right," she said. The man near the table turned. "Excuse me?" Lila looked from the map to the faces around the table. Nobody there looked frightened. Nobody looked like they had climbed those stairs with a dinner tray in one hand and a clipboard in the other. To them, the rooms were boxes on paper. "That building isn't empty," she said. "Those rooms aren't empty." Grant's mouth tightened. "This is a private meeting. I deliver meals there every night." A woman at the table lowered her eyes to the map. Someone else shifted in his chair. Victor did not move. Grant stepped closer, not enough to touch her, but enough to make his meaning clear. "Miss, whatever delivery arrangement you have with a tenant doesn't concern this office. Leave the food and take the elevator back down." Leela felt heat rise in her face. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to gather the empty containers back into the hall and disappear before she made trouble for herself or June. But she saw Mr. Albright's missing cardigan button. She saw Celia's careful signature. She saw the way June's hand had closed around that hidden envelope, so she did not move. "Room 2A is not vacant," she said. "Mr. Albright lives there. He gets low-salt dinners and complains if I'm 4 minutes late. 3B isn't vacant either. Mrs. Doyle has a bad knee and leaves crossword books stacked by the door. Celia Monroe is at the end of the third-floor hall, and she signs every delivery like she's signing a bank loan." The room stayed quiet. Grant gave a short laugh, but it sounded thin. "Anecdotes are not records. They're people," Lila said before she could stop herself. Victor's eyes shifted from the map to her face. "What's your name?" Lila, he said, calm and low. "You understand what you're saying?" "No," she admitted. "Not all of it. But I know those rooms aren't empty." Grant turned toward Victor. "This is exactly why these meetings should not be interrupted by service staff. She's confused." Victor did not look at him. "Is she?" Grant's expression changed by a fraction. The question did not sound kind. It sounded dangerous in a quiet way, like a door closing somewhere no one could see. Lila felt it, and so did everyone at the table. Victor stood. He walked to the map and placed one hand on its edge. "If the property status is wrong, the deal is wrong." Grant's smile returned, careful and strained. "We have certified summaries. Then the summaries won't mind being checked." Leela swallowed. "Checked how?" Victor picked up his coat from the back of his chair. "You'd said you deliver there every night." "Yes, then show me." Grant stepped forward. "Victor, this is unnecessary." Victor finally looked at him. "That will depend on what she shows me." The ride back down was silent. Lila sat in the back of a black car with the red bag on her lap, suddenly aware of how little she belonged in this chain of consequences. Victor sat beside her, his face turned toward the window. He had not used her. He had not comforted her either. That was almost worse. She could not tell whether he believed her or was simply measuring how much trouble she might cause. When the car stopped near the old building, the boardwalk lights were softer now, blurred by the damp night air. The sea breeze looked smaller with Victor standing in front of it. Not because he was large, but because power had followed him out of the casino and into the cracked doorway. Leela led him upstairs. No one spoke much at first. She knocked at 2A, and Mr. Albright opened after a slow shuffle, blinking at the stranger behind her. She asked if he had received his dinner earlier. He nodded, suspicious but steady. Victor looked past him just long enough to see the chair by the window, the medicine bottles on the small table, the framed photo beside the lamp. At 3B, Mrs. Doyle called out before the second knock. At the end of the hall, Celia Monroe opened her door, only as far as the chain allowed. Her eyes went from Lila to Victor. "You brought one of them here?" "I brought someone who needs to see," Lila said. Celia's face hardened. Seeing is cheap, Victor did not step closer. "You're right," that surprised her. It surprised Lila too. Celia studied him for a long second. "Men in good coats have been coming around with papers. They call this place underused. They call us complications. Nobody calls us neighbors anymore. Leela held her breath, hoping Celia would say more, but the older woman glanced toward the room behind her, then back at Victor, and whatever she was guarding stayed guarded. I don't hand old papers to strangers, Celia said. Victor's gaze moved past the chain into the narrow room. Something changed in his face then. It was not soft exactly. It was worse than soft. It was recognition. He looked at the worn floorboards, the old radiator, the little kitchen space tucked into the corner. His hand lowered slowly to his side. Leela watched him. For the first time all night, Victor Raines seemed less like the man from the glass room and more like someone who had walked into a memory he had not expected to survive. There used to be a man on the second floor, he said quietly. Kept a radio by the window. Fixed things for people who couldn't pay. Celia's eyes narrowed. You knew him? Victor did not answer right away. Down the hall, a television murmured behind a closed door. The smell of reheated dinner lingered in the air. Leela stood with the red bag hanging from her shoulder, suddenly understanding that the map upstairs had not only erased these people. It had erased a piece of him too. Victor looked at the hallway, then at Celia's chained door, and the controlled stillness returned to him in a different form. This building, he said, almost to himself, was never supposed to be part of a clean deal. By morning, Lila's hands still smelled faintly of the old hallway. Steam heat, plastic dinner trays, and the dust from Celia's doorframe. She sat across from Owen Pike in a cramped legal office above a storefront, with her red delivery bag tucked against her chair like she was afraid someone might take it away. On the desk between them lay her delivery logs, a stack of signed meal sheets, and the small notebook she had never meant anyone important to see. Owen did not rush her. He read slowly, one page at a time, his finger moving down the dates, room numbers, meal notes, and signatures. You wrote all this yourself? He asked. Leela nodded. It's just for my route. If somebody doesn't answer, or if they look sick, I write it down. These are not just notes, Owen said, still careful. They help show a pattern. But they won't be enough by themselves. The words sank harder than Lila expected. She had come in hoping that truth, once laid flat on a desk, would suddenly become powerful. Instead, it sat there in blue ink and uneven handwriting, looking ordinary. Her ordinary. Dinners delivered. Doors opened. Names signed by hands that trembled. What else do we need? She asked. Something tied to their right to be there, Owen said. Old leases. Addendums. Notices. Anything showing those residents were not supposed to be listed as empty. Lila thought of Celia's chained door and the way the older woman's eyes had sharpened at the mention of papers. She has something, Lila said. I don't know what. But she has something. Owen closed the folder. Then she has to choose to share it. You can't force her, I wouldn't. I know, he said. But fear makes people hear pressure even when you're offering help. That was what worried Lila most. Not Grant. Not the glass room. Not even Victor's silent anger. It was the thought that by speaking up, she had taken people who were already scared and pushed them into the open. When she returned to the Seabreeze, the building seemed to be holding its breath. Celia opened her door only after Lila knocked twice and said her name. I'm not signing anything, Celia said. I'm not asking you to. You brought him here, I know. You brought money into a hallway where people can barely pay for heat. Leela took that without arguing. I thought if he saw you, he couldn't pretend. Celia's face changed, but only a little. People pretend best after they see. Leela opened her notebook and held it out, not to show off, not to prove herself, just to let Celia see the names. I've been writing down who answers, she said. Who gets dinner? Who needs help? Owen says it shows people are here, but it isn't enough. If there's an old paper that proves the building can't just call you vacant, he needs to look at it. Celia stared at the notebook for a long moment. Her own name was there, again and again, beside neat little notes. Signed, no assistance requested. Complained about peas, asked about mail. The older woman's mouth tightened. You really wrote all that? Yes. What? Leela's answer came quietly. Because I was afraid one day somebody would say nobody was here. Celia did not move for several seconds. Then the chain slid back. Inside, the room was small and orderly. Everything kept with the precision of someone who owned little but protected all of it. Celia pulled a flat envelope from beneath a drawer liner and set it on the table. "I kept it because I don't trust new paper," she said. "Old paper tells on people." At Owen's office, the document changed the air in the room. He read it once, then again, and his guarded expression gave way to something firmer. "This matters," he said. Leela gripped the edge of the chair. "Enough?" "Enough to make them explain why protected tenants were marked empty." That afternoon, they walked into the casino tower together. This time, Lila did not carry dinner. She carried a folder. Grant Mercer was already waiting in the conference rooms, standing near the same map, looking polished and patient. Victor sat at the far end of the table, colder than Lila had seen him. His eyes moved once to her folder, then to Owen, then back to Grant. Grant began before anyone else could. "This young woman has an emotional attachment to the building," he said. "Her aunt lives there. That does not make her a reliable source on development status." Lila felt June's name hit the table like a shove. For a second, shame and anger rose together. Her aunt had hidden the letter because she was afraid, and now Grant was using that fear to make Lila look small. Owen placed the delivery logs on the table. "She is not here to interpret the law," he said. "She is here because her records show repeated contact with residents listed as vacant." Grant gave a polite smile. "Delivery mistakes happen." Owen added the signed sheets. "Repeated signatures do not happen by accident." Celia's envelope came last. Victor leaned forward when Owen slid the old addendum across the table. He did not touch it at first. He only looked at Grant. "Did you know about this?" Grant's smile held for 1 second too long. "Old documents surface in distressed properties all the time." "That wasn't my question." The room went quiet. Leela stood beside Owen, heart pounding. But something inside her had shifted. She was still afraid. She still knew less than everyone else about contracts and towers and money. But she knew the sound of Mr. Albright's slow steps. She knew Celia's careful signature. She knew June's hand, closing over a letter she could not bear to show. Those things had shape now. Owen explained the addendum in plain language. The long-term residents had protections that should have been disclosed before any clean transfer. The delivery records supported the fact that those residents were still living there. The map had not simply been mistaken. It had made living people disappear on paper. Victor's voice was calm when he spoke. "This deal stops here." Grant turned toward him. "Victor, that would be a costly overreaction." Victor stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "What would be costly," he said, "is letting my name sit on a deal built around erased people." Grant's face changed then. Not much, but enough. The confidence drained from the edges. Victor looked to the representatives across the table. "No transfer, no signing, no quiet correction. The records go to civil court review, and every party in this room stays available until the filings are complete." Grant reached for a folder near the map, but Victor's hand came down on it first. "Leave it." For the first time, Grant looked at Lila as if she were no longer a delivery girl who had wandered into the wrong room. He looked at her as if she had opened a door he had locked himself. Leela stepped out of the conference room with Owen and Celia while the others remained behind. Her legs felt weak, but she did not feel small anymore. Behind the glass wall, Grant stood exposed beside the map he had tried to make clean, and at the head of the table, Victor Raines was already setting the final terms that would decide whether the Seabreeze would be saved or merely mourned. The next morning, Lila found out how heavy silence could be. No one raised a voice in the conference room. No one threatened. No one slammed a fist on the table. But the air still felt tight enough to bruise. The same map lay open under the glass lights, only now it had changed. Red tabs marked the rooms that were not empty. Copies of Celia's old addendum sat beside Owen's neat stack of delivery logs and signed meal sheets. Lila's handwriting, once private and uneven in a little notebook, had been copied into the official record. She stood beside Owen, her hands folded in front of her, trying not to grip the strap of the red bag at her feet. She had not brought meals today. She had brought witness. Victor sat at the head of the table, colder than ever. His expression gave nothing away, But Lila could see where his anger had settled, not in his voice, not in his hands. In the stillness around him, Grant Mercer stood near the window, one folder pressed against his side. He looked less polished now, though his suit was still perfect. The men and women across from him kept glancing at the papers, then at Victor, then away. Owen spoke first. He kept his voice plain, as if he were explaining something to neighbors over a kitchen table. The residence listed here cannot be treated as vacant for the purpose of a clean transfer. The delivery records support current occupancy. The addendum supports protected tenancy. Any redevelopment that ignores that will not survive review. Grant gave a small controlled breath. This can be corrected internally. There is no need to damage an entire project over clerical language. Celia, seated stiffly near Leela, looked at him like she had spent her whole life hearing men rename harm until it sounded tidy. Clerical language? She said. You called my home empty while I was sitting in it. Grant did not answer her. He turned to Victor instead, as if the older woman's voice did not carry the same weight. Victor looked at him for a long moment. You knew, Grant's jaw tightened. I knew the property had complications. You knew people were there. The room went quiet again. Leela watched Grant search for a safer word and fail to find one. That, more than any confession, seemed to finish him. Victor turned to the investors. Mr. Mercer is removed from this project. His communications and revisions go into the court review. If he misrepresented occupancy to protect his fee, he will answer for it there. Grant's face went pale in a way that made him look suddenly older. Victor, you don't want this public. Victor's voice stayed low. You use my name to make people disappear on paper. Public is the gentle option. For the first time since the night before, Lila felt her shoulders lower, but relief did not come all at once. It came in pieces as Owen moved through the terms. A portion of the Seabreeze would remain senior housing. The long-term residents with protected rights would not be pushed out under false vacancy claims. Those who had to move during repairs would receive a relocation fund, written into the agreement, not promised over coffee and forgotten. A resident seat would be created on the redevelopment board. Then Owen looked at Lila. She should hold that seat, he said. Lila stared at him. Me? Celia made a dry sound beside her. Who else knows who's alive in that building? The answer broke something open in Lila's chest. Not pride exactly, not triumph, something steadier. For so long her job had been to enter quietly, knock gently, get a signature, and leave before anyone important noticed her. Now an entire table had stopped to make room for what she had seen. Victor did not speak for her. He only looked at her, waiting. That mattered, Lila swallowed. I'll do it, she said, but not as decoration. If I'm there, I get the reports. I get notices before they go out, and the residents hear it from us before they hear it from a paper taped to a door. Owen nodded once. Celia sat back as if she had finally allowed herself to breathe. Victor's mouth moved almost into a smile, though it never fully became one. Put it in. By afternoon, word had moved through the Seabreeze, faster than any official notice ever had. June stood in the hallway outside her room, one hand over her mouth, while Lilas explained what had been agreed to. She listened without interrupting, until Lila said the room was protected, the process had changed, and no one would be treated like an obstacle without a name. Then June reached for her. She did not cry loudly. June was not that kind of woman. She simply held Lila's face between both hands and rested her forehead against hers. I should have told you about the letter, June whispered. I know. I didn't want you carrying one more thing. Leela closed her eyes. I was already carrying it. I just didn't know what it was called. Down the hall, Celia stood in her doorway, arms crossed, watching the residents speak in low, amazed voices. When Lila passed her, Celia handed back the envelope that had held the old addendum. Empty now, you keep good notes, Celia said. So do you. Celia's mouth twitched. Old paper tells on people. That evening, Lila took the boardwalk route again. The sky over the ocean had turned the soft gray blue of early evening. The casino lights blinked awake behind her, still bright, still rich, still certain of themselves. But the old building had lights too. One in 2A, one in 3B, one at the end of the third-floor hall, where Celia had finally opened her door without the chain. Leela carried the red bag on her shoulder, heavier than usual but no longer humiliating. At each door she knocked, waited, listened, and wrote down what mattered. A signature, a name, a voice answering from inside. When she reached the last stop, she looked back once toward the boardwalk, and then down at the bag in her hand. For the first time, it did not feel like proof that she was invisible. It felt like proof that she had seen everyone else.